Affective fallacy. Today we are going to study an important concept of literary criticism called affective fallacy. This topic is extremely important for UG, PG, NET, SET, competitive exams, and also for understanding how literature should be analyzed academically. The word affective comes from affect, which means emotion or feeling. The word fallacy means mistake or error in reasoning. So, even before we begin, remember, right finger affective fallacy equals mistake related to emotions in literary criticism. Keep this idea in mind. We will now go step by step. Definition of affective fallacy. Let us understand the definition very clearly. Affective fallacy is a critical error that happens when a reader or critic judges a literary work based on the emotional response it creates, rather than what the text itself actually says. In very simple words, if you judge a poem by saying, "It made me cry," or "It made me feel happy," you are committing affective fallacy. According to W.K. Wimsatt and Beardsley, affective fallacy occurs when we confuse the poem with its emotional effects. Let me explain with an example. Suppose a poem makes one reader feel sad and another reader feel inspired. Now tell me, which emotion is correct? Can emotions decide meaning? No, because emotions change from person to person. So, the critics say meaning must come from the text, not from the reader's feelings. Origin of the term. Now let us see where this term came from. The term affective fallacy was coined in 1946. It was introduced in an essay titled, The Affective Fallacy. This essay was published in the journal The Sewanee Review. The authors were W.K. Wimsatt, C. Beardsley. This essay later became a foundation stone of new criticism. Exam tip. If you're asked, who coined affective fallacy? Answer: Wimsatt and Beardsley, 1946. Historical context. A. Background. Affective fallacy emerged in the mid-20th century. It was a reaction against earlier critical approaches, especially Romantic criticism, emotion-centered, impressionistic criticism, reader-based judgments. Earlier critics believed literature should be judged by how deeply it moves the reader. New critics strongly opposed this idea. B. Literary climate. During the period 1930s-1950s, new criticism dominated literary studies. The focus shifted to close reading, formal structure, textual autonomy. New critics believed literature should be studied scientifically and objectively, just like a discipline. So emotions were considered unreliable, subjective, unscientific. Affective fallacy versus Romanticism. Now let us clearly understand the difference between Romanticism and affective fallacy. Romantic criticism says, emotion is central. Readers' feelings matter. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Affective fallacy says, emotion is unreliable. Readers' response must be ignored. Meaning exists inside the text. One-line contrast for exams. Romanticism celebrates emotion. Affective fallacy rejects emotion as a critical standard. Core features, characteristics of affective fallacy. Now, this slide is extremely important, because most exam questions come from the features of affective fallacy. If you understand this slide properly, you can answer short answers, paragraph questions, essay questions. Let us take each feature one by one, slowly and clearly. Feature 1. Reader's emotion is unreliable. First and foremost, affective fallacy argues that readers' emotions are unreliable. Now, why do new critics say emotions are unreliable? Because no two readers react in the same way. Let me explain with a simple example. Suppose you read a tragic poem. One reader may feel deep sadness. Another reader may feel hope. Another reader may feel boredom. Now tell me, can the poem have three different meanings just because readers feel differently? No. That is why Wimsatt and Beardsley say, emotional responses vary from reader to reader and therefore cannot be a stable critical standard. Important exam sentence to remember. Since emotional reactions are subjective, they cannot be used to determine objective meaning. So according to affective fallacy, emotion depends on mood. Emotion depends on culture. Emotion depends on personal experience. Therefore, emotion is unstable, meaning must be stable. Feature 2. Focus on the text alone. Now let us come to the second and most central feature. Affective fallacy insists on focusing only on the text. That means, not the reader, not the author, not the emotion, only the text itself. Meaning should be derived from language, imagery, metaphors, symbols, rhythm, structure, form. The new critics believed that everything needed to interpret a literary work is already present inside the text. Let me simplify this. The poem is like a closed system, you do not need anything outside it. So when you analyze literature, you must ask, what does the language suggest? How is imagery used? How is the structure organized? Not, how do I feel? What emotion does it create in me? Feature 3. Objectivity in criticism. Now students, this feature explains why affective fallacy belongs to new criticism. New critics wanted objectivity in literary criticism. What does objectivity mean? Judging something based on facts, not feelings. They believed literature should be studied systematically, analytically, almost scientifically. So according to them, literature is an autonomous object. It exists independently of readers. Key idea: emotional impact belongs to the reader, not to the text. That is why emotions are considered external, personal, non-literary. So affective fallacy rejects emotion because it destroys objective criticism. Feature 4. Rejection of psychological response. Now this is a very important feature. Affective fallacy completely rejects reader psychology, emotional state, personal reaction. Why? Because psychology changes with time, changes with age, changes with experience. So new critics say, psychology cannot decide meaning. One very important line: feelings are not meaning. Let me repeat it clearly for exams. Feelings does not equal meaning. This single line can be used as a conclusion, a short note, a one-line answer. Major practitioners. Now let us see who supported affective fallacy. The primary theorists are W.K. Wimsatt, Monroe C. Beardsley. They were the ones who coined the term, defined the concept, explained why emotion is misleading. Other important new critics associated with this idea include Cleanth Brooks, John Crow Ransom, Alan Tate, R.P. Blackmer. Indirect influence. All these critics supported close reading, text-centered interpretation, not reader-centered interpretation. Relation to other fallacies. Affective fallacy versus intentional fallacy. Now students, this comparison is very frequently asked in exams. Both affective fallacy and intentional fallacy reject external elements. But what do they reject exactly? Intentional fallacy rejects the author's intention. Says author's biography and intention are irrelevant. Affective fallacy rejects the reader's emotional response. Says reader's feelings are irrelevant. Common idea: meaning must come from the text alone. This clearly shows the core philosophy of new criticism. Why affective fallacy is called a fallacy? Now the question arises, why do we call it a fallacy? It is called a fallacy because emotions are subjective. Emotions differ across cultures. Emotions change with time. What made a reader emotional 100 years ago may not affect a reader today. So if we depend on emotions, meaning becomes unstable. Interpretation becomes unreliable. Hence, emotional judgment leads to misinterpretation, and that is why it is called a fallacy. Lesser known and important points. Exam gold. Now, this slide is pure exam gold. Listen carefully. Point 1. Affective fallacy does not equal no emotion in literature. Many misunderstand this. Affective fallacy does not say literature has no emotion. It only says, emotion should not be used as a critical standard. Literature can move us emotionally, but criticism must remain objective. Point 2. Opposition to reader response theory. Reader response critics like Stanley Fish, Wolfgang Iser, they argue, meaning is created by the reader. But new critics say, meaning already exists inside the text. So affective fallacy directly opposes reader response theory. Point 3. Influence on academic teaching. Because of affective fallacy, close reading became popular. Exams became text-based. Personal opinion was discouraged. This shaped modern academic evaluation systems. Point 4. Decline of the theory. After the 1960s, structuralism, post-structuralism, reader response theory, these movements challenged new criticism and brought the reader back. So today, affective fallacy is respected but not blindly followed. Criticism of affective fallacy. Now let us understand the limitations. Major criticisms include: literature is meant to emotionally affect readers. Reader cannot be completely removed. Meaning changes with time. Total objectivity is impossible. Therefore, modern critics feel affective fallacy is too rigid and mechanical. One-line revision points. Let us revise in one breath. Coined by Wimsatt and Beardsley, 1946. Part of new criticism. Rejects emotional response. Focuses on textual autonomy. Opposes romantic and reader response criticism.